G'day, I'm Andrew Stagg. I usually go by Staggy, and I'm going to be one of the group leaders during the rock phase of Rock and Ice 23. I'm here today to explain what personal gear you need for multi-pitch trad climbing at Mount Arapiles in early spring, which is the time of year we're going to be there. So around that time of year, Arapiles typically has quite varied weather. You can get some wet days with showers coming through. You can also get some beautiful clear days where the sun comes out and it can get quite hot. So you need to be prepared for those conditions. So as such, I've dressed today with what I'd typically wear when I'm going to Arapiles at that time of year. So starting at the top, the helmet here, I've got a whistle attached, which is, you can tell when there's a defence climber at the crag because they got these god-awful whistles on them. Underneath I've got a hat here that's got no knob on the top. This one's got a flap on it, but any old hat you can any old cap you can pull the knob off and it'll work underneath your helmet. For glasses, I've got these ones are photochromatic, so they adjust to the light conditions, but that's not necessary. You can get away with any standard glasses and just have some sort of lanyard or a strap on them so you don't drop them when you're halfway up the cliff. For a shirt, I've got a long sleeve shirt, fairly hard wearing, and you want to be able to roll the sleeves up to control your temperature. So you don't want to have to stop and take off layers. When you're on the go, you'd rather just be able to roll your sleeves up, and the forearm has got a lot of blood vessels close to the surface, so it's good for releasing heat to control your temperature. Depending on the forecast for the day, the prevailing conditions, you might want to wear a t-shirt underneath and a soft shell potentially over the top. But I've got the issued merino thermal. Polypropylene is sufficient as well, but I'd recommend this one. Just cut the cuff off right there, and you're able to roll them up. My day pack here is a 25 litre, so somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 litres would be about right for multi-pitch climbing. I've got a camelback. I'll go through all the gear that I have in the day pack later on. So continuing down, harness, once again I'll go in detail about the harness later. For the bottom half, long pants, something of fairly sturdy construction, but still you want to have good flexibility in it. So canvas or ripstop nylon is usually a pretty good option. These ones are good. They've got some reinforcement on the knees and on the backside where most of the wear happens when you're climbing. Shoes, I wouldn't recommend wearing heavy boots. Something like these Merrell lightweight hiking shoes are ideal because sometimes you may have to put them in your bag and carry them up the cliff with you. And in the mountains they say light is fast and speed has a safety quality of its own. I'll go into that theme a little bit more as I go through some of the other gear. For my 25 litre day pack here, on the side we've got a first aid kit with a whistle. On the other side here, got a headlamp. Now this is absolutely mandatory. Everybody needs to have a headlamp on them because there's always a chance that things don't go according to plan, and if you get benighted and you don't have a headlamp and you're trying to solve problems in the dark, that's when the risk really ramps up. So 100% mandatory that everybody has a headlamp and spare batteries on them. Speaking of mandatory, trail mix in here. Great thing you can quickly get a little bit of extra energy as you go. A non-brand specific chocolate and candy covered peanut in there is once again mandatory. If you're in my group, you'll get cut away if you don't have these to share with the trip leader. Speaking of cut away, as the group leader, I always carry a knife on me for rescue situations, and if one of the participants really annoys me, I need to cut them away. Continuing on the front here, we've got another option for descent shoes. These are lightweight, I think Vibram 5 fingers. So if I'm wanting to do a bit of a harder climb and leave my lightweight hiking shoes at the bottom, these can just slip in here without taking up too much space. In the front of the pack here, we've got a personal locator beacon. Yeah, only the group leader needs one of these per group. So that's if you're out of phone range and you have an accident. Sunscreen and chapstick. If you're anything like me, you've got a heap of these Joint Health Command issued chapsticks. So many that you can play play Silence of the Lambs till the sheep come home. And if you get that reference, come up and let me know, because you'll get a prize. Alright, I also have sanitizer in here. In the main compartment, I've got my trusty Wraps guidebook. My climbing shoes. Now there's a bit to talk about with climbing shoes, because these make all the difference on how hard you can climb on the day. A lot of people tend to go too tight with their climbing shoes, so think they'll become an awesome climber just by having tight shoes. And for the type of climbing we're going to be doing, that's just not going to work for you. You want to have a shoe that's firm but comfortable enough that you can sort of wear it for half an hour to an hour at a time without a break. I've got some gloves, some belaying gloves here. It's optional, mainly as the group leader. If it's cold and I'm doing a lot of belaying, I'll want to keep my fingers warm. As far as my next layer goes, I like to wear this vest. It's a windstopper vest, and for the type of conditions that we've got in spring at Arapiles, it's about right for me. The other option is if you've got less layers on underneath, something like this soft shell. Once again, good to have lots of vents and options so you can control your temperature on the go without having to stop and take it off and throw it into your backpack halfway up the cliff, because that's when things get dropped. Also, for emergencies, I've got a rain jacket in here, nice bright colour so that people can see me. And importantly, a 2 to 3 litre camelback should be enough for a day at Mount Arapiles. Now I'll go through the gear that you'll be carrying on your harness when you climb. To start with, you'll have a belay device. This will be issued to you, and we'll show you how to set it up and use it correctly during the training stage of rock and ice. You'll also carry a number of locking carabiners. Point to note with these, unlike that one there, when they're hanging on your harness they don't need to be locked. When you close them, just go all the way to the end and then back it off just a little bit so it doesn't get jammed. You'll have two prusik cords of the various lengths, a short one and a long one. One of them attaches from your harness to the rope when you're doing a self-rescue, and one of them is from the rope to your foot, so you can climb up the rope. And we'll once again teach you how to do that during the training phase of the activity if you don't know how to do it already. And last of all, a nut tool. These are for removing trad gear from the rock when you're seconding, and this one has a lanyard on it so it doesn't get dropped. Alright, the next thing we're going to go through is the harness. The first thing you need to know is how to put the harness on, and I find the easiest way is to place the harness on the ground, get all the tangles out, and then just step your legs through the waist belt and the correct leg loop respectively, and just pull it up from there. Because you don't want to be that guy who's got a twisted harness, about to take off the cliff, and you have to take it off and readjust. So I'm just tightening the harness down there. My harness is got a automatic threaded back through. Most modern harnesses are like that, but some of the harnesses that you might borrow require you to thread the tail of the strap back through the harness when you're done to keep it safe. So the only other piece of gear on the harness that I didn't mention before is your personal anchor system, the PAS. So this is for attaching yourself safely to anchors. My personal opinion on the PAS, or the personal anchor system, is that it's a bit unnecessary. We always used to get away with a daisy chain for aiding, but the theory was that they didn't have isolated loops, so it could break and shock load the system. Some of the UATLs alive today would roll over in their grave to hear me saying that, so we'll just leave it there. So when before you climb, you should always do your A, B, C, D, E checks. So A is for anchors, so it's the group leader's job to make sure the anchor is secure, and it's your job as a participant to make sure you're secured to the anchor. B is for the buckle, as I mentioned before. Make sure all of your buckles, legs and waist are threaded back. C is for carabiners, so anywhere where you're attached to a safe point, make sure the gate of the carabiner is shut and locked. D is for devices, so your belay device, make sure that your rope is threaded through the correct way. So let's say that free end there is to the climber, and this carabiner of mine is designed so you can't cross load it, but you just make sure that your end that's going to the climber is the end that's locking off. And E is everything else, so include helmets. Everyone's got their helmets on. If you have long hair, make sure that it is tied up in a plait or a ponytail at the back so it doesn't get into any devices, and just a general check of anything else, a bit of situational awareness. So that covers all the personal gear you'll need for climbing at Arapiles. If you have any questions, you'll have the opportunity to ask them at the Zoom information session that will be running prior to the activity. If there's any differences between what I've described today and what was on the gear list that Lyle sent out, go with Lyle's list as authoritative. I hope it's been helpful, and I look forward to meeting you all at Arapiles. Hello, Staggy here again. My lawyers have advised me that for legal reasons I have to clarify that I will not cut you away on the rope unless it's absolutely necessary in a rescue situation. Now, I've already attached a rescue rope and your original rope is jammed, so you don't have to worry. Unless you really piss me off.